this is why one of the reasons I've decided to share my story online with, with people that may be watching, because I feel like in the rawest form, I've like my story or my background at least, right, is relatable to a lot of youngsters probably out there who actually don't even realize that they've got a level of potential in them. I mean, where I am now in life, my viewpoint is every single individual has got an immense level of potential in them in some way, shape or form that can provide value to the world. All that happens is with some people, circumstantially or intentionally or unintentionally, that value gets exploited and brought out of them. And there are so many people who just go by who don't get to realize that value in them. And whether that's because of they don't get the right opportunities, or they always just stay in what I call a space of limiting self-beliefs.
Hey guys, before we get into the episode, I just wanted to share a super exciting announcement, if you didn't know already, which is that we have officially launched our education arm of Social Awaken, Social Awaken Academy, starting with our first ever course called Grow Your Brand with Social Media. Now, whether you're an entrepreneur, an influencer, a content creator, or you're just looking to see noticeable results from social media, then this is the course for you. It's the culmination of years of experience in running the leading social media agency, and this course will literally change the game for you. So check it out, socialawakenacademy.com. All the links are also in the description. Now let's get straight into the episode. Welcome to another episode of Recipe to Success Season 7. This one is a special one, but before we get into the episode, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, all of that good stuff. And you can see from the camera here, my first ever book is officially out. So be sure to show your support, show some love. It's available on Amazon. All the details are in the description. And now let's get into the episode. Yousif, it's an honor to have you here. It's one that's been in the making for a while. And this one I'm particularly excited about because a lot of people may not know your face, may not know you, but they've most likely seen your businesses or visited your businesses. So this is almost one for real business owners. I think one that people are really going to appreciate. And I know, you might not want a huge introduction. You're a very humble person, but truly I am honored for you to be here because aside from, having the privilege of being able to work with you and spend some time with you and have conversations with you, you're definitely someone that has been instrumental in my journey this past year, especially.
Thank you.
You've been there for me. You've been like an older brother to me in many ways. And I really appreciate that. And I think I wanted to start the podcast on that note just because I'm one of those people that I like to give my flowers today. I like to let people know how I feel today because you never know with life. And sometimes people need to understand as well what a person really is like and what their character is like. So we're starting the podcast on that note. Yousif, for anyone who doesn't know, obviously they probably know by now, but why don't you give us a bit of an introduction of who you are, what you do and everything that you've got going on.
Cool. Thank you for
I rambled on a little bit about it.
It's fine. Thank you for that introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here. As you know, I've not really done many podcasts in the past before, but I'm on a bit of a trajectory to do some to share whatever little value or experience that I'm able to do with the the world out there, from my journey. So you've introduced me by name. I am one of the co-founders and current MD of Heavenly Desserts. I operate that business at the moment with my business partner Imran, who you also know as well, and a fantastic team. We've been doing that for almost over a decade, longer than that, in franchising. The brand's been going since 2008. It's been a good journey. I think most people around the UK have probably in some way, shape or form have either heard of the brand or interacted with it. So I don't know beyond what you want me to say from an introduction, but no doubt we'll start going into more and more of that. But in short, that's That's me. I'm a father, a family man, and amongst all of them things.
A very humble introduction for sure. But I mean, look, without obviously people not knowing the size of it, let's say, there's people internationally watching as well. So Heavily Desserts, let's break it down. It's how would you describe it? Let's say you're doing an elevator pitch. You're telling someone about what your brand is. Why don't you tell us? Because obviously the heights that you've reached, I think you're being very modest. Yes, definitely most people have seen it or heard it. But what you have done in the franchise space is very unique. What you've built is very unique. So yeah, let's kind of go into a bit more detail.
I mean, look, first of all, it's important for me not to sit here and take all the credit, right? I don't know whether it's a Steve Jobs quote or one of these kind of big magnets about a great business is not built by one person, but a team, right? And certainly with Heavenly Desserts, I'm usually quite careful, with ensuring that I don't make it about myself, because like I said, it's never one person, and that because you run a business, and you want to have been able to just do it on your own, right?
Yes.
You've got a whole team around you. But coming back to the question, we're a dessert restaurant concept, in short. So our menu is full of sweet treats and desserts. We have now got circa 60 locations around the UK. We're now operational in Canada as well, and so we've got one operating location in Canada, with another one in build. In fact, we've got a few more going into build over the next few months, and that's going to be our next biggest growth market. Aside from that, we are about to open in Pakistan as well, in Lahore, which we're really excited about. That's been in the making for quite some time. And there were some movements around where we were originally gonna open in Pakistan, and then obviously we switched over and went to Lahore instead. Other than that, we've got activity happening in Europe. So we're on the ground looking for sites in a number of the key European cities as well, with plans to spread the sweet love, I guess, far and wide, in as many different countries as we can. So the USA is very much part of our plans, and as is the Middle East, with it being such a hot climate. So that's a short introduction.
Amazing. And 2008 obviously is where the story begun. I do want to delve into the story of how Heavenly Desserts begun and how you got started. But before we do that, I want to understand why Heavenly Desserts. What inspired the business that we see today? And by the way, guys, not only is Heavenly Desserts a dessert concept anymore, they've also released brunch now, almost nationwide. So definitely check that out, because that's one of the newest things. And I do want to go into that a bit more, because sometimes there's a challenge of pivoting and stuff like that. But we'll come back to it. There's loads to talk about. But yeah, so why Heavenly Desserts? Why desserts?
I mean, look, if we go back to pre-2008, me and my business partner Imran, we were so we've always together been in food, right, from a partnership perspective, and before that we were franchisees of a fried chicken brand, and that's really where we learned, or I certainly learned my operational experience, what it was like working under a franchise system.
What year was this?
2004, I think, maybe. Yeah, something like that. 2003, 2004. I'll have to go back in some kind of archive to really pull the year out. But you're talking around about this time.
Early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s. So we were in a different business. That went well. Alhamdulillah, it taught us a lot. We were quite young, so we were like in our early to mid 20s then, I think. Yeah, early 20s. So it was like graft mode, working, driving up and down, the motorway, and we had locations in a few different cities. So I'm from Derby. I'm born and bred in Derby, but our locations were always around the West Midlands. So the early years were spent, kind of doing that. Like I said, learning the franchise system, the do's and the don'ts. What it was like working under, area managers who came in and audited your operations, and really just working in a structured environment. So we did that for a few years. got some valuable learnings from that, and we once upon a time we then decided to exit that particular business, for all sorts of different reasons. Fried chicken obviously is not the healthiest cuisines, and during that period we were seeing the growth of brands like Pepe's, and all of the kind of grilled peri chicken kind of guys. So the kind of market was starting to go that way, because that was a new phenomena, right? It was healthy, peri, almost like that Nando-esque type experience, but in a in a quick service restaurant format. So we felt, look, it's probably the right time to exit from that particular business. And for those watching who probably have been on a journey where they've exited one business and gone on to another, naturally before you're about to exit, you're thinking about, okay, well, what are we going to do next, right? So the discussions in our camp were exactly the same. So by now we understood, look, food is our thing. We like operating in food. We understand the food game, and we've kind of got the whole operational element right. So that there were so many things kind of on our shortlist at that particular time, but naturally, because we were both very active in keeping an eye on what was happening in the food game, on our radar was understanding, okay, do we go into something that is kind of already existent from a cuisine perspective, or do we do something different that isn't really hyped yet, or perhaps at the beginning of the curve, and that's really where desserts came into it, because during that time, during that period in time, I mean, around the country, like dessert, cafes, parlors, restaurants, whatever you want to call them, they weren't really a known thing, right? They weren't really established. I think the London scene was, I mean, it wasn't even developed, right? I think you had guys like Afters, I think on, is it Green Lane, Ilford Lane, I think. So down south you had like guys like Afters, who were up and about, and there was a real kind of excitement around this particular venue that you go into is exciting, and you've got like such a large array of desserts, right? And I often speak about this when we do some of our webinars for prospective franchisees, is that during that period in time, it was pretty normal when consumers went out to, whether it was for lunch or dinner, to restaurants, so whether it was whatever, Chinese, Indian, pizza, whatever, everybody mostly consumed all three courses in that one particular venue, right? So starters, mains, and desserts, right? Because there wasn't these dessert venues dotted about where you could then go on for your third course to another venue, and it just made up your whole kind of experience on that particular evening. So I guess without realizing, and truth be told, during that period in time, we didn't have this data, right? This during this period in time, like Instagram and TikTok weren't even born yet, right? So we're talking about a period in time which was like, seemed like a different world to
You
me.
were just figuring it out, basically learning as you go along.
Yeah, almost. But we knew, look, this is the direction we wanted to go in. And then, lo and behold, Heavenly Desserts, was founded in 2008. And that's when we kind of, shortly after got involved with the brand. And in Birmingham, right, which was the first location. And after that, we went on to open location number 2, which was in Derby, in 2012. And that was an interesting one, because by sort of 2011, the reputation of Heavenly's in Birmingham had grew. We started to get a bit of a cult following. Birmingham being one of them places that's visited, like, by lots of people from around the country. We benefited from that because the awareness of Heavenly was also then existent in different towns and cities around the country, not on a mass level, but on a small granular level, right? So then we said, look, okay, the Birmingham restaurant, does well. We had an ambition to obviously grow. And then we kind of said, okay, well, let's do another one, naturally, as you do, right? So we said, okay, where? And then we decided, right, let's do it in Derby, because, I was from Derby, so operationally that would have been a little bit more easier. And B, we felt, look, if we can replicate it in Derby, right, because Derby's a small city, especially during that time. It didn't have a food scene. Even now, the food scene is really thin because people prefer to go to Nottingham, Leicester, Birmingham. So we thought if it does well in Derby, then that's gonna help us to understand that it's a scalable business that we can then replicate in other territories. So fast forward to 2012, we kind of I wouldn't necessarily say rebrand, but we gave the identity of the business a bit of a makeover, made it more corporate, right? And then we opened in what was then the Westfield shopping centre, which since then it's changed. The shopping centre still exists, but it changed ownership. It's changed ownership. So we opened in Westfield in 2012 October. I remember it very clearly. And it didn't take the city, it didn't sweep the city, okay, but it was definitely a very welcome addition to the city's food scene, right? And even in Derby around that time, my memory doesn't serve me as well going back so long, but there was either one or two like very small dessert parlor type places, but nothing that looked or felt like heavenly. So we spent a couple of years. In fact, no, we didn't spend a couple of years. We opened that in 2012, and we let it run, and alhamdulillah, it kind of built itself up. And then in the following year, in 2013, we opened in Leicester, and that was the real hotbed, location-wise. I think for those people listening who may remember that particular period when we opened in Leicester, again, the dessert scene was very thin. There wasn't that many people about or that many players about. When we opened in Leicester, I would say for probably 2 years continuously, we would have a queue out the door, almost like a nightclub queue, right?
Wow.
And it was like unseen of, it was unheard of, and 45-50 minute wait on the weekends. Like now you go to food places today and you kind of get that queues and this and that, right? But you don't really see that on the weekdays, right? So like that was a really good experience. It went, we went from 1 to 3. And even for myself, from an operational perspective, trying to get that customer experience consistent throughout each branch, like it was a challenge, but it was a challenge where I learned a lot, right? And during this moment in time, we didn't have no plans of franchising this business. It was a case of, look, a handful of guys, because at that particular time there was a third business partner involved with the business, and it was a handful of guys who all had their individual skill sets, putting them together to grow this particular business that we were all passionate about. So we went from Leicester. So after Leicester, we didn't open anymore for a couple of years because it was just about, look, let's just settle and get things right. And then in 2016 we opened in Nottingham, and again that really flew off the handle, because by now the dessert sector is fairly well developed in the UK. The awareness for like dessert restaurants, cafes, concepts, whatever you want to call it, was starting to become mainstream. So that was kind of the early journey. I mean, we could probably do a whole episode just on them early, just on them early years, right? But I'm conscious, we're limited with time. And then it was in 2016 where we kind of came to the junction where we said, look, okay, we definitely have a business model that we've honed, developed, built over the years, that's successful, it's profitable, it's well liked, it's gained a good reputation for being a quality establishment within the dessert sector, both from a service and a product perspective. So okay, how do we scale this, right? And after lots of deliberation, I think for any business owner listening to this as well, who has built a successful business, who is now looking to franchise, it's a daunting decision. And the reason it's daunting for a couple of reasons is A, because you don't know what's on the other side, right? And B, the common thing you're saying to yourself is, I've put all of this blood, sweat and tears into this particular model business, which is mine, it's my baby or whatever else. How are we gonna trust this in the hands of other operators? So we had like similar, between the business partners, we had similar discussions. But then we came to the realization that actually, if you look around the world, in any sector, so whether it's food or non-food, actually some of the biggest brands that we are aware of, and we consume from, or at least did consume from before boycotts came in, McDonald's, Starbucks as an example, and there's many others, right? Like some of the best brands in the world are franchised brands. And then we kind of realized, actually, well, no, it's fine, but as long as you do it right. And then the commitment we made was that we were always going to do it right. We weren't going to, cut corners. We weren't going to just give a franchise license to anybody who knocked on the door. And I think, I can confidently say that we've pretty much, for the large parts of it, certainly intentionally, we've remained committed to that, which probably is one of the reasons. It's not the only reason, but one of the reasons that we've got a good reputation, alhamdulillah, and it's been the business model is strong. Aside from the economic climate and what we've been going through with COVID and all of that stuff, and the rest is kind of history. 2016, we made a decision we're going to franchise. We assembled a team. We went out to the market in late 2016, 2017. Saw the first round of our franchise stores open. We opened 3 in the first year. So we opened in Liverpool, Northampton, and Oxford. And then each year we've just seen a sustain. What we feel, it's felt sustainable to us, right? We've had comments to say, you guys have grown a lot over the years, and yeah, I guess we have, but it's felt sustainable because we were always very careful about ensuring that as the business model grew and the store base grew, that our internal team infrastructure also grew. So it probably hasn't felt as painful, but that's the kind of long and short, man. And now we're kind of circa 60 and looking to grow internationally.
What a story. And I know you tried to make it concise as much as possible, but honestly, amazing story. I want to go back a little bit. Like you mentioned at the start, before Heavenly, you were a franchisee of a fried chicken business. Was that your first success?
So that was my first, me personally, that was my first business. And yeah, you can say first success because it was my first business and it was a success.
So what led up to that? Because I kind of want to go back a little bit to your childhood, and I think chronologically kind of lead up to that point of starting a franchise in a fried chicken business, which then led you to Heavenly Desserts. I want to actually go back to the earliest memory you can remember of your life, because I always find that super interesting. Like the first memory where you don't know what age you were. You might have been 2, you might have been 3, you might have been 5. It might be vivid. But what was that like? Because there's always a reason why people end up in what they end up in. I often feel. So it's super interesting to kind of go back. So what was life like as young Yousif? And what's the earliest memory you have?
You're asking somebody who actually, and for those who know me, know that at the best of times I forget things, right? I don't have the best of memories, probably because of everything that kind of goes through my head, right? I don't know if this is my earliest memory, but I've got some, like most of us probably do from my childhood. I've got some vivid memories. I remember very clearly going to. So as a kid, probably like most kids, I was into wrestling, right? WWE, and back then I think it was WWC or something.
WWF.
Before that, there was
WCW.
WCW. Yeah, you probably don't. I don't even think you remember that. Probably.
I was watching wrestling since young, but yeah, that was a different era. I guess I looked back at that time.
Yeah.
As
So
the heyday.
and the reason I mentioned that is obviously me being a wrestling fan. I remember there being like a local wrestling show coming to our city, and my dad taking me, which was one of the good memories that I have. I don't know. I must have been 8 or 9 years old. Probably no more older than that. And there's probably a handful of similar experiences that I can recall upon from my childhood. I'm 38, so which means I was born in 86. So I spent I grew up in the 90s, right? And for those again who are watching who also grew up in the 90s, like it was a good time, right? There was no social media, right? Our forms of entertainment were TV, and even then I think it was like a handful of channels, right? We didn't have Sky. I don't even know if Sky existed then. It was Nintendo and Mega Drive, which is what I used to have. It was that era. And if you weren't playing your Nintendo, you were out on the street kicking a football around with the kids from the street, right, or the next few streets. It was that era when it felt like the summer holidays were 6 weeks, but they felt like they were like 3 months long. And I've got some very good memories. I kind of did like most people do, did school, secondary school, then went on to doing college. I never really went to school for. I was never really into studying, right? I more went to school for the social element. So academia wasn't really my thing. So left school, went college because that's what everybody did, right? At college or A levels, so I went college. I studied IT because that was actually something that I was interested in. So I did. I don't even remember what it was, but it was something IT related. I did, and that's what I wanted to go into. I come from a family where, other than one uncle, who for ever since my memory goes back has had a car repair garage and so on and so forth. There's nobody else in my kind of either immediate or wider family that's done business, let alone anything of some sort of scale. So I didn't really have any that inspiration around either, right? My father, was taxi driver for most part of his working life, and did the very best, like all fathers do, and did during that period in time to kind of earn and put food on the table and put a roof over the heads of the family, right? So, I don't have a story where at 16 I knew I wanted to be a businessman and I wanted to do this and I do that, right? So it was a good journey. After college, I had a very short stint at uni, and again that was more so because it was the done thing during that time. If you didn't go to after college, if you didn't go to uni, you were seen as a little bit of a failure. So I went to uni, very short stint, dropped out, and then went straight into the world of work. But having said that, I think I got my first job when I was like 14. Right, there was a local gym, and again for those that might be listening or might listen to this from Derby, in that particular era, in the area where I grew up in called Normanton, there was a gym called Quest, right, and it was one of them backstreet, hardcore, weightlifting type gyms, and I was into a little bit of training, and I know you're keen to go into this a little bit later, and we'll touch upon it. So I was into kind of training even from when I was a teen. So I ended up getting a job at that particular gym in the evenings, right? So what I would do is I would finish school, go masjid, like most of us did, right? And after that, go to sorry, this was around college time, I think, not school, college, right? Go to the gym. I think my job was to watch the desk for 2 hours, right, or something like that. And what I'd get paid £25-30 a week, right, and I'd get to train in the gym. And for me, that was a win-win, right? So I've always worked and I've always done lots of different things.
You said you didn't have that typical entrepreneur story, but was there an underlying, obviously you came from humble beginnings, was there an underlying need of, I want to be successful, I want to make money, or was that not prevalent?
You know what? No, there wasn't. And I think this is why one of the reasons I've decided to share my story online with people that may be watching, because I feel like in the rawest form, I've my story or my background at least, right, is relatable to a lot of youngsters probably out there who actually don't even realize that they've got a level of potential in them. I mean, where I am now in life, my viewpoint is every single individual has got an immense level of potential in them in some way, shape or form that can provide value to the world. All that happens is, with some people, circumstantially or intentionally or unintentionally, that value gets exploited and brought out of them. And there are so many people who just go by who don't get to realize that value in them, and whether that's because of they don't get the right opportunities, or they always just stay in what I call a space of limiting self-beliefs. So answer to your question is no. I didn't have a plan, right? It was just okay, well, just do the next thing. And what I mean by that is, okay, well, after school, go to college. After college, go to uni. After uni, get a job. And then, okay, well, that's it. Then you've got a job, and then you get a mortgage, and you buy a house, and then you start a family, and then that's it. You just work, and then you pay, and then you live your life. So it was very much kind of like that until so I got to uni, dropped out, went straight into the world of work, and along that journey, I was fortunate enough to do a number of different jobs, right? So I did warehouse work. I worked in call centers. I worked in retail. I worked in security. My last job was for the Department for Work and Pensions, working for the job centre, right, doing back office things, and probably that's where, I mean, that was probably my last stint of working in a corporate environment, right? You know, where you've got, you know, management hierarchy and the systems and there's processes and all of that. So, you know, during your work career, you don't realize, but actually in each job that you do, you're picking up little skills and experiences that you don't realize at the time, but you're just adding them to your arsenal, right? And, you know, for some people later, they become your strengths, right? So whilst I was working for the Department of Work and Pensions, I'd been doing that for a couple of years. A group of friends who are like family, who were already in business, encouraged me and another friend from our circle to go into business, because they were already a very successful and established, you know, family business, and I guess like good friends do, they encouraged me and like I said, another friend of ours who was in our friend circle to go into business. So, you know, got a lot of support, got a lot of direction, and were encouraged to go into business, which is where that first fried chicken franchise kind of whole thing came about, right? So when that came about, I was fortunate because all the things that I'd done, actually the common denominator with all of the things that I'd done were always consumer facing. I mean, apart from like a bit of warehouse work that I did, which I took something from, everything that I did from a work experience up until that point was all consumer facing, right? And then I just took all of that experience, right? Coupled it with the fact that, you know, we had a franchise, so there was a degree of systems and processes, although, you know, that franchise had its own challenges at that time. All of these things then became, you know, part of my toolbox really, to operate effectively.
So if you didn't take that leap to the fried chicken business, it's possible that Heavily may have never existed.
I mean, look, you know, I'm not the one, I'm not the only person who founded Heavily, so I don't know. I mean, the answer is, you know, I guess the answer is if I didn't take that leap, right, and you know, the co-founders as independent individuals also didn't take certain steps and leaps, yeah, Heavenly probably wouldn't have been here.
The reason why I asked that is because a lot of people think that, or I guess a lot of gurus will say that you have to really carve out your path and your plan, essentially, of life. And I think sometimes nowadays there's a lot more pressure on people to make it early, to be successful, to make money and all of these things. Whereas at that time, I guess the point of comparison was a little bit less. You know, you were more focused on your own family, your own group of friends, and what you would see around you. So it's quite interesting that you said you're relatable because of that fact that you didn't necessarily orchestrate to the point that you are today. What would you say to anyone who is in a similar position? Maybe they're early 20s, early 30s, whatever it may be, and maybe they're stuck in that rat race, or they're stuck in that environment of follow the steps that the typical person follows, and they're kind of feeling a bit hopeless and they don't know what's around the corner or if they will ever be successful. What would you say to them?
I mean, so that, you know, like when you talk about gurus saying, you know, carve out a, you know, I don't know whether you said carve out a plan or carve a pathway or whatever. Look, there's nothing wrong with that piece of advice, right? Because, you know, all you have there is somebody who has gone through an experience, is now labeled a guru because they've got a degree of experience, and they're sharing their gems, right? And saying, look, carve out a plan. So, and that statement in itself is fine, right? And you know, for as many people who can take that and digest it and then create a plan or a pathway for themselves, that's absolutely fine. But I think my message is, you don't always need a plan. I didn't have a plan, right? You just, sometimes you've just got to keep going, heading in the right direction, do the right things, surround yourself with the right people, and doors open for you, right? In relation to your question about, you know, anybody who's probably, you know, stuck in that rat race, ultimately, you know, there's a number of ways we can answer that question, right? Or certainly I can. The first thing is, look, business isn't for everybody, right? You know, it's tough, right, in any sector, right, and it's not for the weak, and it's not for the faint-hearted, and not everybody is a businessman, and we have to accept that. In terms of like being stuck in the rat race and what to do to kind of come out of that, yeah, every individual will always have a number of different options. So you can go down the route of business, and if inside you have a feeling of wanting to, or a feeling or a desire of wanting to go and explore business, then that step should be taken, because that feeling and that desire exists for a reason, right? But you don't necessarily have to be successful. You don't necessarily have to do business to be successful, right? How many people do we know that have worked their way up the corporate ladder?
Yeah, the current CEO of Nike.
Yeah,
He started off as an intern.
yeah. That's like on a global level example. But even like if we look, closer to home, how many people do we know that are really successful because they've gone up the ladder in whatever realm that they're in? I mean, I know so many people from my city who are successful because they've just continuously grinded in IT.
I'm sure even execs at Heavenly, like people that have grown within Heavenly.
I mean, all of our
different businesses.
Yeah, all of our senior team are really good examples, because they've been on a journey. They've been working in hospitality. They've started off being a normal team member, then they went to a supervisor, and then they went to a store manager, and then they went to and followed that journey, and like now they're a head of operations.
Guys, just to interrupt the episode, I just want to remind you that Social Awaken Academy has officially launched, starting with our first course, Grow Your Brand with Social Media. This course is something I'm really, really excited about, because I've literally put all my knowledge and expertise that I've learned over the years into this course, as well as my expert team. So you definitely need to check it out, socialawakenacademy.com. All the links are also in the description. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, business is definitely not for everyone. I completely agree with that, and I think not everyone should be a number 1, 2, 3 person in a company.
So I just want to come back to the question. So to my answer rather. So look, business isn't for everyone. If anybody that's in a rat race that has a desire to explore business, then they should act upon that. And if they don't know what direction to go in, the great thing that we have today is the world of digital media, right? So you've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, you've got TikTok, you've got LinkedIn, you've got all of these means to reach people, right? People my age never had that when we were growing up, right? There was no means to reach out to people, right? So I think anybody who wants to do something, my suggestion would be like whatever you want to go into or you want to explore, look to reach out to people in that particular area. So whether it's food, whether it's IT, whether it's AI, whether it's whatever marketing, go and find who are the people that have been successful or are on a success journey in that particular field, right? And ask for mentors. I certainly get a lot of people sending me LinkedIn messages asking for mentorship or advice or so on and so forth. And I know a lot of other people that get the same. So anybody looking to explore, like, that would be my first steps advice. If you're in a place where you want to do something but you've got no idea where to start from, but kind of what area you want to go into because you have a point of interest, right? And you've got to really look at following your point of interest. And that could be anything. It could be sports, right? So that's that. Similarly, there will be people out there who are in the rat race, as we call it, so are in paid employment, and are just not satisfied with what with where they're at. Okay, they've got to follow a bit of a different pathway, because that individual has to ask himself, okay, well, what does the next thing, or what does version 2.0 look like for me? So does that look like, okay, well, I want to climb the corporate ladder within either the company I'm working in or the space that I'm working in, or do I want to stay where I am here and start a side business, right? Side hustle is a common word that's thrown around, right? And or do I want to start something on the side, whether that's going investing money into a little bit of money into property, or whether it's stocks and shares or whatever else have you, and do I want to then grow that, until it gets to a point where I no longer am reliant upon my day job, so then I can transfer over and eventually go and do something for myself. So look, there's always multiple pathways for people to follow, but ultimately it's for the individual to have a desire to know that actually, I want to change the status quo, because that's what it starts with. It starts with the individual. Hopefully that answers the question.
Very good. Yeah, no, I like that. I want to. So you kind of said that you weren't motivated by money. You came from humble beginnings, but you weren't necessarily motivated by money. Did that change once you got a taste of money?
Yeah, look, I think we all go through our experiences with money. I certainly have, and it does change, because when you go from not having money to then having money, whether that's whatever, you've opened a business or something has worked for you, it does change, because all of a sudden what happens is, look, as humans we all have desires, right? Some people are more materialistic than others, and in a scenario like that, when you've grown up with not having the luxuries of life, which most people, certainly my age, didn't. Yeah, when you then get into your early 20s and you've got a successful business and you've got all of this money coming in, what matters then is discipline, right? And how disciplined you are with that is going to determine what you do with that money, right? So those who are not disciplined will go out and blow, and those that are disciplined won't do that, and will make good use of that. So yeah, and I think probably almost most people will probably get into, you end up buying things you don't actually really need, but it's because you like trainers, or you like this, or you like that, and it's all part of life experience, that is. Because you can't get every single thing right. You gotta get some things wrong in order to learn from and to implement. So yeah, I think that does happen.
Definitely. Okay, great. In terms of, obviously, now you said at the beginning, business is not for the faint-hearted. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced that you're able to share that maybe people don't necessarily see? Because I always wonder this, like, even when I was in my early years of business, like, I would always idealize others. Like, I would look at people who I perceived as successful, obviously we have the mega greats, that everyone knows and loves, but even sometimes on a smaller level, you might see someone having a business and it doing well, and them portraying a level of success, and you often fall into that cycle. Is as you grow, you see bigger fish and bigger fish and bigger fish, and we were actually speaking about this off camera. Is perspective is everything. So what I want to know from you is, like, in that journey, what were some of the challenges that you faced? Because it's not always the more money you make, the easier life gets.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think business owners probably, the challenges that they face when they're starting and then go through the scale journey are probably quite similar, because ultimately the principles of business are pretty universal, right? Yeah, there is a spectrum, but the principles are pretty universal. I think in the context of myself, I think business owners who start a business that they have no experience in, and I'm an example of that, because I didn't work in a fast food or a restaurant for that long, although I had a very small stint working in a restaurant, I think when I was like 13, washing dishes in the back, which didn't last that long, and then I did a little bit of work with a friend of mine who had a pizza takeaway. I think those who don't have the experience in what they start probably find the most challenge, right? I think for me it was just at every stage of scale, was the challenge was to navigate the ship and understand if we're going in the right direction. And that's quite a broad challenge. I mean, there's micro challenges that I can refer to, whether it's like
daily challenges, right?
Yeah, the pains of like cash flow management within a business when you're scaling, right? Because you're trying to understand actually, well, we're scaling here, so we need infrastructure. Now that costs money, especially if it's linked to a high level of reliance on human resource. But actually, we're scaling and then we're reinvesting back in. So money's coming in, but reinvesting back in, and then sometimes you're running thin because you've made an investment into this or into that without really doing any real, forward financial projections. And that's certainly been a feature of our journey and my journey within our business, because we haven't franchised a business before. We've been franchisees, and it's very different. Yeah, we've operated businesses before, but different at different scale. So, that's probably a broad challenge.
I guess
that
so.
can
I
refer
guess
to. And then, sorry, just following on from that, like even within that challenge, you got sub challenges, right? So, you're scaling, and your team is getting bigger, right? Even hiring the right people to do the right job is a challenge, and it's a challenge we've come across. I think relatively we've handled that fairly well. I was talking to one of my heads of departments yesterday in an annual review, and we were talking about this particular topic, about the fact that within our head office team, relatively for the most part of it, like our recruitment has been pretty on point, and that's represented by a really low turnover, like really low turnover, which means actually there's a number of people within our head office team that have got long tenures with the business, but also we've hired the right people because they deliver a really good job. So that's another example.
I was gonna say, like, obviously there's so many different daily challenges that you're going through, and of course in different parts of scaling a business there's different challenges. Obviously at the beginning it's are we gonna make it, are we gonna make payroll, are we gonna survive, and then you get to different levels. Where you are today, obviously it's a big business, right? There's multiple moving parts, multiple people in the business, multiple franchisees, there's a lot going on, right? What would you say are some of the challenges on that level? Because, and the reason why I want to focus on that part is because, a lot of people talk about 0 to 10K or 0 to 100K, like the early times in business. A lot of people talk about, how do you get your business off the ground? How do you make it successful? But often people don't talk about what happens when you have made that success, once you have actually built a business. Now, it becomes more about the corporate side of things, or there's so much that goes into businesses, and I think a lot of people are naive to those things. They don't know what they don't know, and they don't know how hard it is to be on a business of that level. So I guess I want to focus a little bit on that. Like, what are some of the challenges, and how do you most importantly deal with adversity and challenges in your own life today? I'm sure that's changed over the years as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously as people we grow and we develop and we learn, and dealing with adversity and challenges, whether it's in life or in business or outside of business, is just that itself is a continuous journey of learning and implementing learnings from previous mistakes, right? Or poor judgment decisions. I think in the context of business, whether you're kind of early stage, scaling or established, challenges are there on a daily basis. The type of challenge just changes, right? So where we're at now, I mean, we're incredibly grateful for the success that we've had, and I speak on behalf of the whole team. I speak on behalf of my business partner, but we don't feel like we've hit success, and I guess the reason for that is because we're always trying to push for excellence, right? And it goes back to the conversation we were having in the car on the way here about framing and perspectives, because in the food industry, the individual who's got 5 franchises looks up to the brand that's got 20, right? And the brand that's got 20 locations looks up to the brand that's got 60, right? So we've got 60, and we think, okay, well, we haven't hit nowhere near peak or the peak of success that we want. So we look up to the brands that have got 150, because we're like, okay, well, we want to get there, right? I think when you get to a place where your business is relatively, established after going through a journey of scale, the challenges then fall in the domain of trying to maintain that, especially when you've got such a large business, large team, especially in our context where it's a franchise business. So the whole success of the business isn't just sat on, like it's not just reliant upon what we do in the head office. It's reliant upon what every franchise partner does on the ground in their location, and then their teams. So there are so many layers involved, where actually at every layer, the execution has to be like 9 out of 10 in order for the whole enterprise to do well. And these are all just things we're talking about that we can control, because you can't control economy, right? You can't control inflation, because all of these things have an impact on what the consumer is then doing, right? And we're very much, like most food brands, are going through that journey at the moment. The inflation and consumers not coming in as much as they used to, pre-COVID, for example. Although things are taking a turn for the better now. So I think when you get to a point of being established, it's about, okay, whilst continuing to try and scale, how do you like maintain the beast that you've built? And they become the kind of day-to-day challenges.
It's quite interesting because at the beginning, when you're talking about your story of like getting into franchises and stuff like that, it wasn't a thing. Like you said, obviously it was McDonald's, Starbucks. It was predominantly for a long time, it was owned. That market was owned like by certain players. You had McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, Starbucks, Costa, maybe a handful of other brands. The reason why I'm saying that is because sometimes there's no blueprint of what you're trying to figure out as well.
Yeah.
And you have to just kind of go each day at a time. And a lot of time people assume that there's one moment that changed everything for them, but it's often every day, those little things that you're doing to get to that point. Sorry, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, but I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. So like in terms of that franchise experience, go for it.
Yeah. So you're right. So when we kind of got going, or when we got involved in franchising as franchisees, so you're talking like early 2000s, in the UK, there wasn't that. So apart from like what they're referred to as AAA brands, so like your McDonald's, your Costas, your Starbucks, your Burger Kings and the like, apart from them AAA brands, like the tier 2 level of brands, right, didn't really exist, right? It was very thin, especially in the food industry, right? But I think maybe over the last 15 to 20 years, that kind of second tier has really grown, right? So you've got obviously Heavenly's, you've got respectable brands out there like Chaiwala, for example, who you can't not mention when you have this conversation, right? Pepe's is another one, and there are
so many,
plenty more to mention. So yeah, you're right. In that era, that it was just them major big boys, but now actually there's a second tier now of brands that have kind of established, emerged, grown, and that second tier now of that franchising kind of domain is a really well established tier with lots of good brands, with like hundreds of locations, maybe even thousands, hundreds definitely between them.
Yeah, so the challenge is never ending, isn't it? I mean, it's just that's the game of business, is always navigating through it. You mentioned like you have got to different stages and you sit back and you don't feel like this is success. The goalpost is always moving, and I'm sure you're constantly on that trajectory of trying to build businesses to the next level, right? But what would you say success means to you today?
Good question, because I was actually going to ask you the same question. Look, I'm nearly 40, right? 38 years old. I was 38 this year, and I've been speaking about this a lot to people in my close circle who are probably either a little bit younger than me or around about the same age, that have had a similar kind of journey or as me. I think I've got to a point where I'm starting to understand that actually success is not linked to like money or finances, right? And I think the issue that we have is in in the world that we live in today, that's what success is linked to, right? So when you talk about, oh yeah, this person is successful, most people will relate that to some kind of financial success, whatever that may be, through business or whatever, right? I don't think it is. I don't think money is the true measure of success, and I don't even think success is like the most important metric to kind of measure for one individual in their life. I think the metric to measure is, are you happy and are you at peace, right? Because you can have £10 million in your bank account, right, and not be happy, right? And I think now with the advent of social media, how many short reels do we come across online, on Instagram, on TikTok, where people are talking about this, right? That actually, having said that, I've got to make it very clear, I'm an advocate for business, right? Because business changed my life, and it helped me to do things that I couldn't do if I wasn't in business. It helped me to help others, for example, give more in charity. So I'm an absolute advocate for business. But what's important is, go out, do business, strive, scale, whatever it is that you're doing, or whatever your brand or your business is doing, like strive to be the best in that domain or realm, right? But don't get it twisted that success isn't that. Success is being in a place where you're at peace, you're happy, you're healthy, you're of able body, you're of sound mind, okay, and you've got people around you, even if it's 5 people around you that are genuinely there for you, they care for you, they love you for who you are, they don't judge you, right, for your for whatever journey that you may have been on. To me, that's success.
Wow. Gave me goosebumps. That's very, very interesting, to be honest, because I think,
don't get me wrong though,
yeah,
if you can have all of them things and £10 million in your bank,
then
that's a good place to be in,
yeah, solid.
Because ultimately
money, what I always say is money,
look, it doesn't buy happiness, but look, at the end of the day, what you don't want to be in a place where you don't have it, and you're struggling or whatever.
The absence of money creates unhappiness.
Yes, correct. So you've got to be able to understand that actually this is a baseline lifestyle, right, that I want to live. And when I say lifestyle, I'm not talking about jets and yachts or anything like that, right? You pay your bills, and you don't have to worry about anything else. You've got a roof over your head, right, and you've got some money in the bank for a rainy day, which over a period of time is accumulating, right? Once you've got that, okay, everything else is then extra. And I'm not saying just attain that and stay there. Attain that, carry on building, but understand that your success and your peace isn't linked to the value of your bank account.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that the world makes everything about money nowadays?
I think it's just the kind of the consumer world we live in, right? Kind of capitalistic societies.
Everyone wants to be rich so that they can buy X.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of things, right? I think it's exacerbated by social media, where it's created that dynamic where it's so easy for you to even now subconsciously compare yourself to the next person, right? When you never had that, right, and you couldn't view what other people were doing. You couldn't compare yourself to other people. The only person you could compare yourself was like those living over the road who might have had a bigger house and a better car, for example, right? But I think it's just the digital world that we live in is really exacerbated that. So we live in a very kind of consumer orientated world, and it's important, especially for those who have got young children growing up who are like digital kids. I think that's them people have got really, and I'm one of them people because I've got young children, right? So it's a challenge, but look, life is a challenge, right? At every stage of your life, especially when you become an adult, right, it's full of challenges, right? But also as Muslims, we know that that's how life is, because Allah is going to test you in a number of different ways, right? We're told that we're going to be tested with our wealth. We're going to get given it, and then we're going to be tested to see what we do with it. Do we spend it in the right way or the wrong way, right? We're going to be tested with our children and our family and our loved ones. So life is just a constant. It's a constant journey.
Self-discovery journey.
It's a self-discovery journey. It's a constant journey where the graph of challenges is constantly going to go like that. Okay, but ultimately it's about ensuring that and again we were talking about this on the way here, is ensuring that you are always in a place of gratitude, and that you're able to pull yourself out of whatever thoughts you may be going through, whether you're comparing or whatever else have you, or whether you're going through a bit of a dip for whatever reason, is pull yourself out, and compare yourself to those who are not as fortunate as you, and then that just puts everything into perspective.
Have you ever felt in your journey of giving up?
Yeah.
And how do you restay yourself on that ship?
You just carry on going. Sometimes you don't have
because I'm talking selfishly here. I'm sure this will benefit viewers, but I know from my own journey that sometimes in business you just want to be in a dark room somewhere. Like you don't want to speak to anyone. You don't want to talk to anyone. Tomorrow seems bleak.
Yeah, look.
And you have to really just persevere. And that could be at different stages, by the way. It could be when you're early and you're not making enough, or when you are at a bigger level and you've got some crazy problems. And we see it a lot with top celebrities. They make it, they've got all the fame, all the money, and then they're just now on drugs, or they die early.
Yeah, because they're chasing a fake happiness, isn't it? They're chasing a deluded version of success that we were talking about. And then you get more money, you get more money, you get more famous, you get more famous, you get more famous, and what you're searching for is never there, because you're just looking down the wrong bloody road. Like in the context of celebrities, and then they sadly end up in this particular place. Look, I think at times, most people, there are probably a select few that haven't probably experienced this, but at certain times when perhaps your stress levels hit peak, in whatever area, whether it's business or outside of your personal life, might be in a relationship that hasn't gone right, or it's ended or whatever. I think it's very common, and I think a lot of people, they just don't talk about it, have been in a place in their life where they feel like giving up in some way, shape or form with whatever it is they're doing. But I think ultimately what we don't realize is that as beings and as individuals, we're stronger than we think, right? And I wholeheartedly believe that, because I look back and reflect on some of my experiences in life, that I've been through, and I think, well, bloody hell, how the hell did I get through that? Because in that moment, in that time, I was like, okay, I don't know how to navigate this particular thing. But again, it's because we're always stronger than we think. And ultimately, as Muslims, we believe that Allah is always paving the way for you. You just something you might be going through something which you think is not good for you, but actually it's good for you, right? So and look, and there are a number of things that can answer this question, right? So one is that inner strength, but okay, so let's delve into that a little bit. What does that mean? That inner strength is made up of resilience, right? You got to have the grit, you got to have the resilience, you got to have the patience, right? Because that's a commodity that doesn't really exist amongst many people. And again, probably because the world that we live in, where everybody wants, or most people want, things quick, easy, and fast. So, but again, you don't, you're not born with, a high level of grit and resilience, right? Your life experiences teach you that, and without you knowing, these levels are increasing inside you. And then, when you hit a place of difficulty, then these things kick in.
You can't prepare for the war without being in the war.
Yeah.
I want to know, so let's say we're formulating a recipe.
This has turned into a very serious discussion.
No, I love it. I think, these deep conversations, it's not widely available. There's a lot of people that talk rubbish online, and there's not enough valuable information. I feel like you have to almost find the gems.
I think finding valuable information online now, whether it's podcasts or whether it's whatever online digital medium, like it's such a busy space. There's more people out there just just talking.
Access to information is not our problem anymore. It's
No.
it's
It's
the
finding
right
the quality information. Yeah.
So just going back to, so like, let's say we're formulating a recipe right now, to success, you know, pun intended, no pun intended. But yeah, let's say we're formulating a recipe. If I go through some of the things that you mentioned throughout the podcast, you know, we mentioned discipline, we mentioned resilience, we mentioned patience. What are some of those other steps needed for that formulation, that you would even advise your own children?
I mean, first of all, look, all of these concepts that you've just talked about, which I mentioned, you know, discipline, resilience, grit, etc. I mean, like, discipline is a really good one. I think, you know, in the early part of my journey, right, I wasn't a disciplined individual. Has my discipline got better? Yeah, definitely.
How important is that in life?
I think
Discipline.
it's very important. Yeah. And as a teen, and even in my early years of business, in certain places, you know, I didn't possess discipline, right? But I think that's a feature of the learning journey, right? But I think discipline is one of the most important things, and I think an individual's disciplines level grow, right? A lot of things, when it comes to discipline, in my opinion, are linked to, you know, your early childhood experiences as well, and how the discipline levels in you have been molded by those responsible. So whether that's parents or, you know, older siblings and so on and so forth. So look, ultimately, you know, we're products of our environment, right? And our environment is always changing. So the environment that you grew up in when you were a child, is gonna ultimately, you know, the environment you grew up in when you were, like, you know, when you went from 0 to 10 years age, is gonna some way, shape or form shape the environment that you is going to shape your teen years, right? And, you know, your environment and your experiences that you're exposed to in your teen years ultimately then go on and, you know, make an impact to, like, your 20s. So again, it's why I say, like, life is just a forever evolving learning experience, you know, and you learn from your own, you know, mistakes, and you learn from you learn from the mistakes of others, and then you learn from the people around you, and the people around you, like, on a daily basis, I try to be in a state of mind where, like, I'm a learner, right? You have to remain teachable at every moment in your life, because I think that's what really supercharges, like, the accumulation of knowledge, your development as an individual. Like, my son is going to be 9, he's 8 years old. He teaches me, like, I learn from him sometimes, right? As an example. So, you know, those around us can certainly, you know, if we have the right lens on, everything around you can teach you something in your environment.
You said, this is a personal question. How do you stay so humble? Because, like, you've achieved so much, bro, and one of the things, like, you have so much humility, and the way that you are as a person, like, you credit people. Like, you're not one of those people that just acts like he's the man. You know, you even struggled to get through that intro at the beginning because you're just like, nah.
I don't know what to say.
Yeah, but like, do you never think I'm the man? Like, that's it. No one can talk to me.
I hope I don't come across that way. It's not how I like to operate.
Is the personal Yousif versus the business Yousif two different characters? Because I guess when you're in the business realm, whilst you do want to display humility, you're also a very serious guy.
Look, I think you have to adapt so as an individual, yeah, you do have to adapt. You can't be the same person you're at home that you are perhaps in the boardroom, right? Because, you know, you have to adapt because the environment is different, right? The types of conversations that you're having, or the things that you're trying to influence are different. I don't know really how to answer your question. I think it's probably something for others to answer. But I think what you have to remember is that, and this is probably from an advice perspective, is, look, you know, we come to this earth with nothing and we go with nothing, right? And sometimes throughout your journey we get a little deluded, right? By lots of many different things. I try to. I mean, I think every individual possesses a level of ego, and I've always tried to, along my journey, try to ensure that I keep the ego in check, because everybody has it, and sometimes like sometimes it does pop out the box, right? When you've got so many people around you telling you or complimenting you on achievements or accolades or whatever else have you, it's very easy for you to kind of like get lost and think, oh wow, this is all my doing. And in reality, it never is. It's the doing of a number of things that come together at any one particular time, and people call that timing. But timing doesn't also just happen by fluke. Timing is a number of things that come together, as I said, in a particular period of time. So I don't know how to answer that question, but if you were to ask, if I was to answer it from an advice perspective to anybody listening to this, is focus on your ego in terms of trying to keep it in the box. We all have it. And if you can keep that in check, that should, in return, allow you to be, humble or modest or whatever it is you want to call it.
What motivates you now?
Good question. I think just giving value is probably the biggest motivator for me. I can now. I mean, I couldn't do this when I was 30, because at each stage of your life you're in a different place and you're thinking different things. But I think the biggest thing that look, there's not one thing that motivates me, right? But one of the things that I'm certainly passionate about is my business motivates me. As an example, I like getting out of bed in the morning and going to work, because I work with a fantastic group of people who make that easy. The business success is a motivator. Helping others, and helping others isn't just in the form of lending somebody money, for example, right? It's sharing your knowledge and experience, because to me that is much more valuable, right? So I try to make it a mission as much as possible within the time constraints, is to sit and talk to people, especially those who are probably a little behind in the journey. So somebody who's either starting off in business or starting off in their career ladder. I've got a young cousin who's just recently landed a really good job for his age, and I was talking to him. I know he'll watch this, and he'll know who I'm talking about as well. He'll know I'm talking about him. So he's not going down the business trajectory, right? But for his age, so he's just finished uni, he studied in Leicester, and he's just landed a really good job. So I, was speaking to him, giving him a little bit of advice that is transferable from my experience to him. So I think that my biggest motivator now is really just sharing my value, because if one person can take something from it and implement a little piece of whatever knowledge or value or experience I've shared, then I think that's sadaqah, isn't it?
We've spoken a little bit about religion throughout. How important has that been for you in your journey? Spirituality, religion, whatever we want to call it.
I think in the early years it didn't play a really major part. And what I mean by that is obviously from a young age, like most people did. I don't know what the scene was like around here in London, but we after school went to the masjid, right, where we learnt Quran, and that was it. What we didn't learn was what we were learning. We essentially learned Arabic, right, and through that, we got what we didn't build, and I think it's very different now with the younger with the generation now. What we weren't able to build was our Islamic identity per se. I'm talking about en masse, right? Because it was like, go to masjid, learn your Quran. Once you've done it, right, cool, you've done it now, so that's it. So I think in the early years, that teen years, spirituality wasn't really a major part, right? But I think as you get older, it certainly starts to play a bigger part. and again, spirituality, and you never really reach the peak of spirituality, really, do you? Or the peak of iman. I think iman is one of them things that it's a fluctuating matter, right? So sometimes it's up here and sometimes it's down here. But I think where I am now, it plays it plays a large part, and I think ultimately it has to be the center point of everything, because and that spirituality, and you don't, and I mean, obviously I'm making this comment in the context of being a Muslim, right? But for those who don't follow, for those who are not Muslims, or for those who may not even follow a faith, like, everybody needs a moral compass, right? And you've got to find whatever that is for you, whether it comes from whatever faith you follow, or if you don't follow the faith, I'm not well versed to where people then go to find a moral compass, if they're able to, maybe even. But I think spirituality is important because of that point. It kind of tells you, kind of shows you where that compass is, and you always have that benchmark of, are you going in the right direction or the wrong direction.
It's also that thing of what we said earlier, wasn't it? Is that never-ending chase that people have of this world, and thinking that there's a rainbow at the end of it, and that's it, and life is all about that. But ultimately, we're all searching for that contentment, and a lot of that contentment does fall into religion, whether we want to fight it or not.
Yeah, 100%.
I want to move on to gym and fitness, right? Because you're a very fit man. You're always in the gym, MMA, working out, and from a young age, obviously. One of the things that I'm noticing or have noticed by following your journey is all of those things that you mentioned, like the discipline, the consistency, the resilience, they're portrayed in your actions. And praying, for example, is one of them, is that we have to be consistent every day. We have to pray every day. And yes, our iman goes up and down, but there's that element of discipline, there's that element of consistency. And the same with fitness and gym. Are these things tactical in that sense of, you feel that this is how you stay disciplined, this is how you stay resilient? Like, let's talk about your fitness kind of love and journey.
I think it goes back to probably when I was in my early teens. I have an older cousin who technically is a cousin, but actually I see him no different. He's an older brother to me, in Derby, Asif. And he was the first person to really get me introduced into my fitness journey. So I don't know, I think I must have been year 7, year 8, secondary school. And I remember him coming along saying, right, next week I'm going to take you training. And I was like, okay, cool. And I don't know, I think he must have been, at that time, he must have been in his late teens, and he used to train then as well. So he took me to this place, kind of backstreet garage, and again, for those from who may come across this episode from Derby will know exactly what I'm on about. There was a number of elders from the community who would run effectively a little community gym in a garage, right? So it was a little garage lockup. It was freezing cold in there in the winter. There was carpet on the floor, punch bags up, and there'll be a number of different activities happening there. So there'd be some people in there doing boxing. There'd be some people in there doing sort of taekwondo, kickboxing, and so on and so forth. So that's where I got taken. Growing up, being into wrestling, I was also into Bruce Lee movies, and that was the era of Van Damme and all of that, right? So
Arnold,
yeah, in the bodybuilding scene, but kind of on the martial arts scene. So I went there, and I started to enjoy it, right? So I think from around about 12, 13 or whatever I was, kind of year 7, year 8, all the way up to about 16, 17, I did a form of martial arts, right? So whether it was kickboxing, in the later years I went into boxing, and that was my first journey. And actually, sometimes I reflect upon that, and I'm grateful to him for doing that, because had he not taken me there, I may well have got on the journey at some point, but getting on the journey so early was down to him, right? So I did that, and then kind of when college comes, you get a little bit older, and then I kind of got into the kind of whole weight training, bodybuilding scene, etc. So I did that through most of my kind of early most of my 20s, and then kind of when I got into business, that kind of part really suffered, right? So when I started, my first business, even in the earlier years and the building years of Heavenly, like gym really suffered, because you're just on the grind, right? Early starts, late finishes, and so on and so forth. But then kind of almost over the last 5 or 6 years probably, I've really tuned in. So I've dabbled with a number of different martial arts. I've done a bit of BJJ, which was really helpful. But now it's just about keeping fit, in a balanced fashion. So getting stronger, lifting weights, a balanced level of cardio. And I think as I've got older, I've realized that there is a connection to being healthy, to being physically healthy, which contributes to you being mentally healthy. And when you're in a good place physically and mentally, that only has a positive impact on all the other facets of your life. So whether it's in your personal life, i.e. anything to do with outside of work, or within work as well. And I think it certainly contributes to like resilience levels within the workplace, because in order to go and do a solid workout, you've got to be disciplined, you've got to have resilience, you've got to have grit to power through it. And even in that workout, sometimes you're like, oh my God, I can't lift this today. I need to drop 10 kilos off this. And that again, you can draw the same parallel with life, right? So, whoever I speak to, I encourage it so much, i.e. training, some form of activity, physical exercise. It doesn't have to be in the gym if you don't want to, but if you're playing badminton 4 times a week, for example, and you're keeping fit, you've got to do something. But ultimately, if you can go to the gym, because getting stronger is important.
Love that. Yousif, I could sit here all day, but obviously we have time constraints. But honestly, truly a pleasure. I think we definitely need to do a part 2 because there's so much that we could have gone into that we haven't had a chance to. But yeah, honestly, truly an honor. Thank you so much. I know you don't do this often, and this is almost a new chapter in your life where you're now releasing some content, you're building your personal brand and so on. I just want to pass it over to you now. Just any final messages that you may have for anyone watching, listening, viewing that's made it to the end. And also then where everyone can find you now on this new kind of journey that you're going on.
So, I mean, parting message is, life is it's a journey to be experienced. It's not a problem to be solved. I think that's one of my messages. Discipline is important, because without discipline, you will go off in all sorts of directions, and I speak from experience. You go down all sorts of experiences which are sometimes not the right experiences for you. Surround yourself with good people, and I think one of the biggest underestimated things in life is working on your personal development as an individual, and that can mean different things to different people. And it's probably, for another episode for us to go into. But personal development and working on yourself and all the areas that you are not strong in, okay, has got to be your number one objective, because the best version of you will then serve those around you in the best possible way. And let's face it, as humans, we're not perfect. I don't even think perfection is a particular place that you actually reach, but it's a journey of continuous improvement, right? And eventually you get to a particular place where actually you're able to provide value and do all the right things by all the right people around you. So I think that's probably my parting message. I mean, anybody who may want to reach out to have a conversation in any way, shape or form, find me on Instagram. I think you're probably going to put it somewhere.
Yes, all in the description.
Link. So yeah, you can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn, for example. And for anybody who wants to have any discussions around business or mentorship or anything like that. So thank you for having me. Like you said, it's not something that I have done a lot of, but I am hoping to do more of.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, definitely. I like having deep conversations. So yeah, I'm hoping to do more of these, to share my experiences, so that hopefully others can benefit and value, because ultimately I think that's what we're placed on this earth for, right? Is to add value, and we can all do that in in lots of different ways. So thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and inshallah, I look forward to doing it again.
Definitely. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed that one. Definitely go show some love to Yousif, and you're definitely going to be seeing his face a lot more with your support. So definitely show some love. Make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and we'll see you on the next episode.